We all know what it's like to sit through a rainy day. The sky goes grey, the plans get cancelled, and you tell yourself it'll clear up tomorrow. Now imagine it doesn't. Imagine it rains the next day, and the next, and the one after that. Imagine it keeps raining through the entire life of every person you've ever known, and their grandparents, and their grandparents' grandparents, and it still doesn't stop. Now stretch that out, not for years, not for centuries, but for 2 million years. It sounds like a myth, a biblical flood story stretched to an absurd degree, but it isn't a myth. It's a real chapter in the history of this planet, a genuine climate catastrophe when the skies opened up and in large parts of the world essentially refused to close for a span of time longer than our entire genus has existed. Geologists have a name for it. They call it the Carnian Pluvial episode. And here's the twist that makes it one of the most important events you've never heard of. This endless rain didn't just drown a world, it created one. Because when the skies finally cleared, the planet had a brand new set of rulers, the dinosaurs. This is the story of the 2 million year rainstorm that gave us the age of dinosaurs. Let me set the scene, because the world this happened to was almost the opposite of a rainy one. Roughly 234 million years ago, we're in the Triassic period, and all the land on Earth is fused into the single supercontinent, Pangaea. And a supercontinent that size has a serious problem with weather. Specifically, it barely gets any. Rain clouds form over oceans, and by the time they drift inland across a landmass that vast, they've long since dropped all their water. So the interior of Pangaea was a colossal desert, hot, arid and dry, stretching for thousands of miles. Rain, for much of this world, was a coastal luxury. And then, quite suddenly, in geological terms, that dry world turned wet. And we know this because of the rocks. In the 1970s, geologists working in the limestone Alps of Austria found something that didn't belong. A distinct layer of dark grey rock, the signature of wet, humid conditions, sandwiched between the reddish, arid rocks above and below it. A wet layer pressed like a bookmark into a desert world. And the same telltale signature turned up elsewhere, including the Italian Dolomites, where you can see the transition with your own eyes. Dry mudstones, and then, abruptly, the marks of a drenched landscape. Now, I want to be precise here, because the popular version of this story runs a little ahead of the science. It's usually told as 2 million years of non-stop rain, and that's not quite right. What the rocks actually show is a humid interval lasting somewhere between 1 and 2 million years, during which the climate lurched violently, with at least 4 distinct pulses of extreme, sustained rainfall separated by less intense spells. So it wasn't a single, unbroken downpour for 2 million years, but it was, by any human standard, a near-permanent state of rain. A world transformed from desert to swamp, on and off, for longer than we can truly comprehend. Which is arguably stranger than the myth. So what could possibly flip a planet from desert to deluge and hold it there? And the answer is a culprit you'll recognize if you watch this channel, because it's the same villain behind so many of Earth's great upheavals: volcanoes. Specifically, a titanic outpouring of lava from a region called Rangelia, a volcanic province whose remains now sit in parts of Alaska and British Columbia. These were not ordinary eruptions. They were on a colossal scale, and they peaked right at the start of the Carnian. And when volcanoes erupt on that scale, they belch enormous quantities of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So the first thing that happened was heat, a spike of global warming, as all that CO2 trapped the sun's energy and drove temperatures up. And that warming is the key to the rain, because of a simple bit of physics. Warmer air holds more moisture, and warmer oceans evaporate faster. Heat the planet enough, and you supercharge the entire water cycle. The seas began pumping vast quantities of water vapour into a hotter atmosphere, and that atmosphere carried it further inland than ever before, deep into the heart of Pangaea's Great Desert. The result was a mega monsoon, an intensified global rainfall system that reached places that hadn't seen a proper downpour in millions of years. And so it rained, and rained, and rained. Now, a warm, wet world sounds pleasant enough, but a sudden, drastic change in climate is one of the most dangerous things that can happen to life on Earth, because ecosystems are built for the conditions they evolved in. And when you change those conditions overnight in geological terms, a lot of things simply cannot cope. And they didn't. The Carnian Pluvial episode was, we now recognise, a genuine extinction event. For a long time, scientists counted 5 great mass extinctions in the history of complex life. The researchers who pieced this event together have argued it deserves to be counted among the significant ones, a previously lost extinction. The oceans were hit hardest. The relentless rain washed staggering amounts of sediment and nutrients off the land and into the seas, changing the water chemistry and in places acidifying it, because all that atmospheric CO2 dissolves into the ocean and turns it sour. Whole groups suffered: the ammonoids, the coiled-shelled cephalopods, the conodonts, the crinoids, the sea lilies, and critically, the reef builders. The coral reefs of the day collapsed, and reefs took a long time to recover. So, on the face of it, this is just another grim tale of a world drowning and dying. But here's where it becomes one of the most important stories in the history of life. Because an extinction is not only an ending, it's also an opening. When you clear the board of the old players, you leave empty space, ecological vacancies. And into that space, something new can move. And in the Triassic, there was a group of animals waiting in the wings. Small, unremarkable, and very much not in charge. The dinosaurs. This is the part people find hardest to believe. We think of dinosaurs as the eternal rulers of the prehistoric world. But for the first stretch of their existence, they were bit players. Before the Carnian, dinosaurs were rare, a minor group scurrying around in a world dominated by other reptiles. The land belonged to the mammal relatives, the therapsids, and above all to the great crocodile-line archosaurs, the pseudosuchians, some of which were enormous apex predators. The dinosaurs were the underdogs, confined mostly to parts of what's now South America, and easy to overlook. And then the rains came and reshuffled the entire deck. The 2-million-year deluge transformed the landscape itself. The endless rain broke down the old arid ecosystems, and it drove a revolution in plant life. The arid scrub gave way to lush, expanding forests, particularly of the conifers. The very kind of food available to plant eaters changed. And as the world dried back out at the end of the episode, it settled into a new arrangement that the dinosaurs, as it happened, were beautifully suited to exploit. Their efficient posture, their physiology, whatever the precise advantage, in the world the rain left behind, dinosaurs began to spread and diversify with remarkable speed. They stopped being the rare exception and started becoming the rule. In the rock record, right after this event, you see them proliferate. More kinds in more places, filling the roles left empty by the animals that hadn't survived the climate chaos. The Carnian Pluvial episode, in other words, was the starting gun. It didn't create the dinosaurs, they already existed, but it handed them the world. Without it, it's entirely possible the age of dinosaurs never happens, and the crocodile-lined reptiles or the mammal relatives keep their grip on the planet. Every dinosaur you've ever loved, the T-Rex, the Brachiosaurus, the Triceratops, owes its dynasty in part to 2 million years of reign. And how did it all end? The same way it began, but in reverse. Over time, those vast new forests did something quietly heroic. They pulled the excess carbon dioxide back out of the atmosphere, locking it away in wood and eventually in coal deposits that we still dig up today. As the CO2 came down, the greenhouse effect eased, the temperatures cooled, and the supercharged water cycle wound back down. The rains relented, and Pangaea, true to form, dried back out into desert. The wet bookmark closed, and the arid rocks resumed above it. So what do we take from a 2 million year rainstorm? A couple of things, I think. The first is a sense of scale, of just how profoundly and how slowly this planet can change, and how a single geological event can rewrite the entire future of life. The dinosaurs didn't rise because they were destined to. They rose because a volcanic province in what's now Alaska flooded the world and cleared their competition. History, even deep history, turns on accidents like that. And the second is a little more sobering, and the scientists who study this event tend to raise it themselves. Because the mechanism at the heart of the Carnian, a massive, relatively rapid injection of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, driving warming and reshaping the world's rainfall, is not entirely unfamiliar. It's a version of the experiment our own world is running right now. The Carnian reminds us that the climate is not a fixed backdrop, it's a lever. And when something leans on it hard enough, entire worlds end, and entirely new ones begin. The dinosaurs were the winners last time. It's worth remembering that in these great reshufflings, there's no guarantee the reigning champions come out on top. Usually, they don't. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep looking up, preferably with an umbrella.